So Adobe. One of the things Adobe did is have a lot of creative suites, so like Photoshop and Illustrator, and they would come up with all of these suites, and this is a timeline of their revenues. And you can see they hit a huge inflection point in 2008 with everybody else. They had perpetual software. It was $700 to $800 a package, and it was mostly creatives, so the artists and the designers, and they had pretty much 100% saturation, and they realized in 2008 that they were in trouble because they could see all the other technology businesses who had recurring revenues, who had subscriptions, who were SaaS-based, and they were able to weather the storm a lot better. They also realized that people were skipping generations of their software. You know, it was a year and a half ago when I paid for this. The new features are interesting, but I can live with it. I'm not going to pay out another $700. So they weren't growing the market wasn't buying the product, and they had a business model issue. So they decided to create something called the Creative Cloud. Move all of these products into the cloud as subscription revenue generation. And they announced it, and they decided to launch it. And it was interesting, they announced it in 2011, and in 2012, they had such great confidence that this was going to work that they decided to say, we're not going to have the packaged software anymore. What was interesting at the same time, they knew as they were going through this transition, a very, very difficult transition, their revenues were going to go down. And you can see that happening. They knew that the profit margin was going to go down. And yet, an amazing thing happened. The CFO would walk into the quarterly meeting, the quarterly announcements, and say, I've got great news. Our revenues are down, our profits are down, and that's great news because people aren't buying our box products anymore, and they're buying our subscriptions. Isn't that great? Yes, our revenues are down, profits are down, and you should be happy about this. That's crazy. And what happened is that the stock market understood this because they had been very transparent about this, and their stock price would go up 10%. I don't know how many places you could go into a place, say your revenues are down, your profit margins are down, your stock price goes up. And yet, they were able to do this. In the face of tremendous pushback from customers, even employees in the stock market going, this is crazy, why would you do this? They were able to convince everybody because their priorities were very clear. For us to serve this customer of the future, we had to make this change today. It wasn't a competitive issue because they had no real competitors, but they could see the change coming. And they said, we either do this now or we never do it. So the courage that it took, the conviction it took, and more importantly, the senior team, the executive team never blinked in the face of tremendous pushback from the entire ecosystem. So let me show you what's happened to their revenues over the past couple of years. You don't see hockey sticks very often. And they have tripled their revenues over this time period. And the bottom line has increased, and their stock price has increased by 4x. So it took a tremendous amount of planning and discipline to orient the entire company around this next generation customer. And they were adamant that this is the direction that the company had to pull into. Digital transformation, well, it wasn't so much a technology, it was a business model, but they had to change everything about the way they build, the way they sell, the way they market, the way they measure, the way they understand the definition of success. Everything had to change. This is a huge transformation. And the digital tools that made it possible were the things that they had as an underlying structure. But in the end, it was a strategy of focusing on the next generation customer that made it possible for them.